Okay, we're on. We're live. Welcome, everybody, to our weekly show. Well, not every week, but most weeks. Mark, myself. Post your comments, questions, anything like that, and we'll have a go. Sorry, I'm just going to turn the sound off on this other one. Give me a second. Right, there we go. Right, Marky, let's start.
Oracle,
Box
how's it going?
2021.
Yeah,
Box 2021 out of 10.
Yeah, look, I think I'm going to go out to bat for the Boks. If you consider that they've ended probably the most unusual year in Springbok history as the best rugby team on the planet, it's actually quite remarkable. Look, they went 20 months without playing a single rugby match. I mean, they played the 2019 World Cup final, and then the new year we went into that lockdown. And I must just add that South African rugby probably had the worst lockdown of all the major rugby playing countries in the world, barring maybe Argentina. I mean, when we were in lockdown, there was an autumn series. That Autumn Nations series was happening in the UK. They had a Six Nations. They even had a rugby championship in Australia. Okay, we controversially didn't go. But yeah, we went into that series against the Lions from a complete standing start. I mean, we were completely cold. We had one warm-up against Georgia, and that was a complete stuff-up. Half the Oaks had COVID. We went straight into the Lions. And then, after 20 months of no rugby, we then had 20 weeks where we played 13 tests, and the last one was last week. So all things considered, to win, 13 tests, they won 8, they lost 5, and 3 of those tests that we lost were last-minute penalties against us, where we lost by 1 point. So my argument is, this Springbok team didn't have a chance to do any evolution in 2020 after they won that World Cup. If they'd been able to play 12 tests last year, they would be so far ahead of where they are right now that those games where they so narrowly lost, those 3, I think they would have comprehensively won. So I think all things considered, the Boks actually did really well.
Okay, so New Zealand, I read in the, I always go to Stuff newspaper, I read that New Zealand had won 12 out of 15 and the public were unhappy, which is obviously standard for New Zealand. They lost to us. They lost to Ireland and they lost the French. Did we also play 15 test matches?
13 for us. But you must remember, New Zealand expectation is a completely different thing. They're just not used to losing matches. I mean, I've been in New Zealand where they've lost a match and there's almost a parliamentary inquiry the following week. And, for them to lose 2 tests in a row is, well, not quite unheard of, but it's so unusual. That obviously they're going to turn on their team. That's just how they are, because they have such high expectations.
Correct. And if we look at the matches we lost, we obviously lost the game last week, which was, I said to my wife and kid at 60 minutes, we shouldn't lose this game. A couple of scrum penalties. We looked like we were on the up. The other 2 games we lost, obviously, against Australia and the one against New Zealand. I'm gonna give the South Africans a 7 out of 10. Had they, I would have given them a 6 out of 10 had they not beaten New Zealand. The England game, look, that could have gone either way. It was the last game of the season. It's always quite a tough one. But honestly, we should have beaten Australia this year. When we went into that Tri-Nations Rugby Championship series, I honestly was of the opinion that, we'd played Argentina, but we'd had the better preparation going into that tournament than New Zealand did, who'd played Fiji, and Australia, who'd played what was obviously a very weak French team compared to what's currently playing at the moment.
Yeah,
I'm not convinced we had a great year, but I do agree with you that these weeks and weeks and weeks of, I'm going to call it hibernation, because that's really what it is. Yes, it's a lockdown and whatever, and they don't get to see their families. I don't get to do anything.
I think that what happened then in Australia was just a natural mental dip. Okay, so that intensity of the Lions series was off the scale. They then played. They played the third test against the Lions. The very next Saturday they played Argentina. The next Saturday they played Argentina again. The next Saturday they were in Australia, and they played Australia twice. And I think those guys just mentally flagged. It's the only thing I can. I mean, that first test they still really got up for it, and it was a Quade Cooper penalty at the end that cost them. And then that second test against Australia, that's the only one of the 13 where you can say they were completely outplayed. They just weren't in the game. They weren't there. And I think that was just honestly mental fatigue. I mean, it sounds like I'm defending the Springboks here. I quite often do the exact opposite. So, but what I'm saying there is then the next weekend, that mental fatigue just naturally evaporated because it was the All Blacks in the centenary test, and they played an absolute blinder. Should have won that one. That was another one, Geordie Barrett last-minute penalty, and then the following week, we hammered them. Well, not hammered them, but I mean we comprehensively beat them. We were definitely the better side. Yeah. So yeah, I think next year we are going to see, that's when we should really judge these Springboks, because this year was all about them being on an emergency footing. I mean, they came together in June in Bloemfontein. Now, they hadn't been together since Yokohama in November 2019. They come together, they're in this very strict bubble. Half of them get COVID. They then play Georgia. Then the second Georgia test is cancelled because everyone's got COVID again. There was no chance for these guys to experiment with game plans, with new players. It was, let's keep it simple. Let's stick to what we know. Let's just try and get through this very tough year. And they did that. Now they'll be so much better for having played these high-pressure 13 tests. Now we'll see them next year. Wales come here for 3 tests. And I think we'll then see these Springboks start to add a few more bows to their quiver. I think you'll start seeing not so much of that total over-reliance on those box kicking, which drove everyone mad, drove Faf to have a hip replacement. We're going to see the box try and be a little bit more dynamic. I mean, that back three of ours, okay, maybe not the back three, let's just say our wings and our outside backs are really dangerous. I mean, Mapimpi's a try-scoring machine. Every time he gets the ball, he scores a try. So obviously they want to bring those guys more into play. And I think we'll see that as the Springbok team grows next year. I think next year is an absolutely crucial year for them. That World Cup is 2 years away. Next year, they want to really start to blossom, to get variations in their game plans, to hone that attacking prowess of those backs. And I mean, they've got the players. Damien de Allende, I thought, ended the year, I mean, in exceptional form. Lucanio Am is just growing into a superstar. And then we've got wings to burn. I mean, we had our best wing, Cheslin, not even playing. I mean, he played the Lions, correct. And then that was it. We're also missing, remember, we didn't play without Pieter-Steph du Toit. And they battled a bit to fill that place. I mean, Franco Mostert had a go there. It didn't really work out quite so well. He did all right in the end. I think the jury's still out, but let's just say he's not a Pieter-Steph du Toit. So we've got guys to come back as well.
All right, so just a quick one. You spoke to me earlier before the show, in fact, in the evening. You suggested that we didn't give enough players a chance this year, try to keep the team as close to what it was, keeping that winning combination going. Out of all of the players that didn't get picked to play this year, who do you reckon off the top of your head missed out and could have been picked if they were a little bit more adventurous with their picking?
Yeah, look, I think it's pretty obvious there that so Ninova and Rassi stuck to the tried and tested. They stuck to the usual combinations. And most of the guys really came to the party, except the one everyone's talking about, poor old Villy at the back there. He really battled. Yeah, and then maybe another player who battled a bit. I thought Herschel Yankees also struggled a bit as the backup to Faf. I think Corbus Reiner finished as now the official backup to Faf. But Willie seems lost. I think they've got to really look at options there. And obviously, Apalele Fassi was the one everyone was talking about. And the reason why they didn't pick him, people get sometimes get a little bit carried away. Fassi is a brilliant attacker, and what people remember is him scoring with the first touch of the ball and the amazing things he can do. But now, if you're Jacques Nienaber and you're Russell, and you're thinking we're going into massive test matches against the All Blacks and then on this tour overseas, there's 80,000 people in the stadium. Is Fassi really ready for that? Because I can tell you from watching him at the Sharks, his defense is not good, and his kicking game is very poor. So we get a bit like sort of carried away. Well, he's this brilliant attacker, but have you really thought it through? Maybe it would have been throwing Fassi to the wolves to put him into those massive test matches without him having played a lot more big games at fullback, maybe for the Sharks, maybe in sort of lesser test matches. So I think that was the thinking. They just didn't want to risk it. And unfortunately, Willie didn't really get any better. But I tell you who I watch quite closely, and if people followed the United Rugby Championship and followed the Stormers in particular, Warwick Gallant really came through. He was arguably the best South African player on that overseas leg of the URC, and him at his best, to me, would be the natural replacement for Willie. So I think we'll see the coaching staff looking to experiment a bit there. They've got to move on from Willie, it looks like.
Okay, next up, Dave Rennie, hero or villain? And what should happen to him?
It's funny how it works out. So I think it was exactly a week ago, around about at exactly this time, about 8 o'clock last Wednesday, the Rassie verdict comes out. The next day or two, one of the critics of Rassie is Dave Rennie, the Wallabies coach. Maybe he's looking after his he's a Kiwi, but he's the Australian coach, so he's looking after the Australian ref, Nick Berry, who, of course, bore the brunt of the Rassie video. So Dave Rennie comes out and says, no, Rassie was really harsh, and this poor guy has suffered, and this is not the kind of thing us coaches should be doing. Well, 2 days later, Australia lose to Scotland at Murrayfield. And there are a couple of refereeing botch-ups there that cost Australia the game. They have a guy, Alan Alatoa, is red carded after the TMO Marius.
I watched that. Sorry. I know you're going to carry on. I just want to jump in there. I got to tell you, I'm obviously a rugby punter. I watched the game. I know pretty much most of the laws. I watched that and I thought to myself, this Australian player is pretty silly. He's gone and dived into this thing when they had, they looked like they were going to score. As it happens, they did score. And I walked away from that thinking Australia had missed a trick there. They could have scored. I saw the decision, and I'm pretty sure I'm not much of a ref basher. In fact, I quite like them. I've been on the winning side of most refereeing bad decisions or good decisions for that matter. But honestly, I didn't see anything in it. So that's why I just want to jump in and I do see a lot of these contentious things, and I look at them from all angles. I'm not a guy who thinks a ref is biased. I do think they make mistakes. I do think there's better refs than other refs. But at that particular one, I just thought Australia, I thought that was just bad discipline. Whether it was a red card or not, didn't really matter to me. But I thought the decision was right not to award the try.
Okay, so what he did there is him diving in was silly and it was unnecessary. Michael Hooper still would have scored the try. However, he was done for making contact with the head of a Scottish guy. Anyway, so the try was disallowed and he was red carded. And whatever my opinion or your opinion, World Rugby decided that it was that Marius Jonker was incorrect. The referee was incorrect, and they actually issued an apology. They said the officials got that wrong. So, there we go. Anyway, so that's arguably cost Australia the game. They had to play with 14 men, and it was a double whammy. As that guy got red carded, they also lost 7 points because it was in the process of scoring a try. Anyway, so let's go forward a week. Now Australia go to Cardiff and they play Wales, and there's the same thing happens. There's a red card for Curtly Beale, and they're very controversial awarding of a try where a Welsh centre, Tonkin, looks like he's slapping the ball down. And as he's slapping it down, the referee's right there, and he says to the ref, "It's okay, I've slapped it backwards." So that's okay. You can't put your hand out and smack the ball down. So he picks the ball up then and sort of like jogs to the try line. The whole Australian team stop playing because they think, well, this guy smacked the ball down. Anyway, he gets 7 points. So Dave Rennie in his post-match press conference, he just goes off. He's like a machine gun. He says the officiating is absolutely horrendous. He calls Marius Jonker out by name. He says he's basically cost us the game 2 weeks in a row. Apologies aren't good enough. We as coaches are accountable. We get censured. Players are accountable. They get censured. Why don't the referees get censured? Why Marius Jonker keeps on getting appointed? Remember, he was also... When Rassie made his video, dear Marius was the TMO. Then he's the TMO at Murrayfield, where Rennie says it cost all the Wallabies a game. He's the TMO in Cardiff, where Rennie says it cost them a game. So there's a bit of a common denominator. I know you don't like to bash these guys, but this guy keeps getting appointed, and Rennie's saying,
it's not that it's not that I don't like to bash him. If a referee shouldn't be in his position because he's not good enough, he shouldn't be there. For me, it's mostly about the bias, and I hear a lot when I go and watch rugby at people's houses, or even when I have people around my place. I often hear them saying, "Oh, he's giving it to one team, he's not giving it to the other." I'm firmly against that. I don't believe that. I think that these referees are generally the same with everybody. So that's why I put this little comment up here. This guy, Jonker, is he losing his touch, or did he never really have it? Was he ever a good TMO, or has he just been rubbish his entire time?
Dave Rennie will give you the answer to that. So will Rassie. Anyway, what they're saying is if a guy has a bad game as a player, he gets dropped. If a referee has a bad game, that doesn't ever seem to get dropped. But
okay, so I've got another question, Mike. Over the years of watching rugby, you always see a different referee, and I know some of the guys on the WhatsApp groups are talking about which referee's playing a game because they're going to have decide on how they're going to have their bet because of the referee and obviously the weather and everything else. What I notice is that there's not a lot of TMOs. There seem to be about, 15 referees for this United Rugby Championship and maybe 2 or 3 TMOs. It doesn't seem to be balanced up.
No, it doesn't. I completely agree with you. It always seems to be the same guys. It seems to be a niche job. I'm not an expert on what World Rugby does there, but they've got to look at it now. It's just, in that game, there was one episode that was viewed 14 times by the TMO. Now, how can you have a game of rugby where just one thing is watched 14 times? Now, years ago before TMOs, rugby flowed. Maybe the time has come where we've just got to say, look, okay, so there'll be the odd decision that's incorrect, but for the sake of the game of rugby, let it just go. And maybe there's swings and roundabouts for the teams, and it'll cancel each other out. And that's what happened in the old days. And you had a game of rugby, and there was the only stoppages were for genuine injuries and for half time. But now this TMO thing is just completely ridiculous. A game of rugby can take a couple of hours now. That's obviously what happened in the Lions series too. what was that one game went like sort of an extra 40 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Because
You'll also remember when, before they stopped the clock, we used to have 57-minute first halves.
Oh, man.
It's crazy.
I say put the TMOs back in their boxes and let's get done with them. We've for the sake of trying to get more and more professional, we've actually taken the game backwards. Let's ditch these TMOs. They cause more harm to the game than they do good. Anyway, let's go back to Dave Rennie. The point I was getting to is that this is the guy who bashed Rassie for making the video and for just making disparaging comments about referees. Now he gets all emotional after losing 2 games in a row to perceived refereeing transgressions, and he lets rip. Now, what he said in his press conference was just as bad as anything that Rassie inferred in his video. It's the same thing. Rassie just took an hour and used the video format to make exactly the same point that Rennie did in 5.5 minutes verbally. It's exactly the same thing. Now, Rassie, they've thrown the book at him. They've suspended him. Okay, we're now Wednesday night that we're doing this show. That game is 5 days ago. We haven't heard a word from World Rugby. So, and they've got to say something. And if they don't, it's Rassie's going to think he's got a persecution complex here. I mean,
correct. And I think now that we've seen the Rassie and the Dave Rennie issue, and I mean, I know we used to see that the previous coach of Australia, I forget his name for the moment, but I heard
Michael Checker.
Checker. I mean, he used to mutter stuff and say everything, and he irritated all sorts of people.
Michael Checker came out and supported Dave Rennie. He's come out and said, "Good on you, mate, 100%. I stick by you. Your guys were given a bad deal." So anyway, we wait with bated breath to see what happens. Does Dave Rennie get punished? Because if he doesn't get punished, well, World Rugby have set the precedent. They've banned Rassie for criticising the ref. They have to do the same to Dave Rennie.
Yeah, so my question is, are we going to see a bit more of this, or do you think everything will cool down when the rugby season starts again in January or February?
You see, this is what everyone's biggest issue with World Rugby is. They're just not showing strong leadership on these issues. I mean, no one's having fun talking about bloody referees all the time. We're sick of it. It shouldn't happen. So I don't know. If Rennie gets a hefty fine, maybe everyone will then just button their lips up. I don't know, but I really hope that this thing gets put to bed now, because we want to talk about the rugby. We don't want to talk about this nonsense. We've had enough.
Time to talk about some rugby, Mark. Right, South Africa, all 4 teams playing. Stormers up against Zebra, Sharks up against Scarlets, Bulls up against Munster. And if I remember correctly, it's going to flick out of the next page here. So I was going to say South Africa. Lions are up against Cardiff. So in your opinion, which of these 4 rugby games, South Africa at home, obviously South African teams at home, is the most likely to win? In other words, the banker, guys looking for a multiple, or they sort of have one bet, which is the most likely to win and win comfortably?
It's impossible to go beyond the Stormers and Zebra. I mean, they are 16th. They are stone lost. They haven't won a game. They're an Italian side that is pretty useless. The Stormers
That's the team that the Lions won first up, right? The Lions beat first up.
Lions beat them.
Yes,
Lions
they played them first up, yeah.
Yeah, so they haven't won a game. The Stormers, I think, were South Africa's best side overseas. They're at home. Zebra don't travel well traditionally. They're stone last in the competition. The Stormers are going to pump them. So that's sure, you can't go wrong there. I in fact predict that the Sharks will win. The Lions will win. The Lions are playing Cardiff at Ellis Park.
It's a Sunday game for a change, which is quite nice.
It's on Sunday, yeah. And there's a lot of emotion in that Lions camp. I've heard that Rassie, he's on my brain, that Yanni du Plessis has actually reported back to training. I mean, the whole country was heartbroken over the tragedy that befell his family. I know the Lions will be very emotional for that reason. I think they're going to win. The Sharks will beat the Scarlets at Johnson Kings Park. I'm pretty sure of that. The only iffy game, and it's a massive one, Munster Bulls. That's the only iffy one. Otherwise, I think the other three South African teams will win.
All right, so just quickly, sorry, I didn't see this comment from Nathan. He's only alive. We've got a couple of live viewers right now. We're still getting there. The white card system from Varsity Cup, which is a review system, and I do like. I know they trialed something with rugby recently. I think they did it in the Curry Cup, where they got not the Curry Cup. It was that. Well, the Super Rugby part of the South African season this last year, where they could make a decision if they wanted to go and check what the referee had to say. I was on the fence with that because I think they sort of try to misuse it a little bit and they try to find the loopholes with it. But yeah, very interesting one, Nathan. I know that you were part of that prize, the Stokers voucher, a couple of weeks ago. I still haven't looked at it yet. I'll finally get there. But yeah, I'm in agreement with Mark. I think all South African teams win this weekend. So you want to take a multiple, stick all four of them in. I do agree that the Stormers will probably win by the biggest margin, but their handicap is the biggest. I suppose what I was really asking is who would beat their handicap by the most margin. I think that the likes of Scarlet's going to battle in Joburg. I definitely think Munster are going to battle in Pretoria. I know they're a big team, and I looking about the price, I think the Bulls are probably a bit underestimated. I honestly think these European teams are going to battle to win in South Africa. I think they're going to take quite a long time. In fact, I said it on Brent Graham's show on Good for the Game. I don't see a European side winning in South Africa this season. I think they may win next season, but this season I think the South African teams will be too strong. And I do agree with you that the Sharks were probably the best team over there. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I know that they're not selling beer at the stadium, so I'm not going until they sell beer. Vaccination or not vaccination, I'm not going back to Kings Park until they sell some beer. So they've lost me. I'm not part of the 2,000 that are going. I don't know. Are you at the game? Are you covering it from a journalist perspective, Mike?
I am, Gav. This will be the first one where media is allowed back at Kings Park. Actually, since I can tell you, it was March 2020. Yeah. The Sharks played a game. It was still super rugby then. Eh? They played a super rugby game against the Stormers, and the next week we went into lockdown, and that was it. Haven't been back since.
Oh, there's Nathan telling us he's in Salt Rock after Christmas. He needs the voucher before the trip down. Don't worry, Nathan. We'll sort it out before then. Anyway, thanks very much, guys, for watching. And we'll be back next week, and then we'll probably take a break for the Christmas period, and we'll be back early January after that. But anyway, have a good evening. And cheers, Mark. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Gav.